Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin C. Neese.
And I'm Tim Van Orden, and this is episode 14, Unsanctioned Missions. We'll be starting off with some Star Trek news, and then discussing Discovery Season 3, Episode 6, Scavengers.
And then we'll get into another audience question right after our main topic, Unsanctioned Missions. We'll be talking about those times when our Starfleet characters have disobeyed orders. I'm looking at you, Jim Kirk, in Star Trek 3. Join us, won't you?
I know I will.
Oh, here we are again.
Indubitably.
I can't believe, with this new recording schedule, it's like, I feel like I spend a week on every episode now.
Oh.
Because we record on Thursday. I watch the show on Thursday, and then do Ready Room, and then we talk about what we're going to do over the weekend. We record on Sunday, and then I spend Monday and Tuesday, editing, and then it releases on Wednesday, and then there's a new episode again. So it's just like
constant.
It's the podcast is my life now, except for my actual life.
Right.
Yeah. How are you?
As it should be. I'm good, thanks. I was going to add something to that, but I forgot what I was going to say.
This is my job, to keep thinking until you forget what you're talking about.
I mean, you do it really well.
I try, Did I say keep talking or keep thinking?
I think you said keep thinking.
Because when I think, it just comes out my mouth. So what difference does it make? Oh, boy. So, hey, yes, I have a feeling that we should get into some Star Trek news. What do you think?
I think that sounds like a good idea, especially since I still can't remember what I was going to say.
Well, you keep working on it.
Like the end of the episode, I will remember.
Yeah, I'm sure. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with the heaviest story that we have, just to kind of, first of all, to give it its due. Because I just learned of a death that happened in Star Trek. It was just announced at this point yesterday. And so it was announced on the 21st of November. Herbert F. Solow, died at the age of 89 years old. He was just a little bit shy of his 90th birthday.
And for those of us who don't know what he contributed?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. If you look at the credits of the original series, you will see executive in charge of production, Herbert F. Solow. And also, if you're familiar with a book called Inside Trek, The Real Story, this was like one of the first books written about Star Trek. He co-wrote it with Bob Justman, Robert H. Justman, who was another kind of founding father of Star Trek. Solow, he is, one of these guys who was really important in early television, 1960s television. He worked with Roddenberry to get Star Trek sold in the beginning, and he was just one of those. It's in the early days of Star Trek. It's Gene Roddenberry, it's Herb Solow, it's Bob Justman, it's Gene Kuhn, it's Dorothy Fontana. Like, those are like the top 5 people in Star Trek in the original series, and Herb Solow was just huge in Star Trek. And one of the best biographies or books about Gene Roddenberry, which I wrote. Which I read when I was writing,
Nice.
which I read and drew heavily upon when I was writing my first book, is Gene Roddenberry: The Last Conversation, by an author at that time going by the name Yvonne Fern, who after the publication of that book, actually married Herb Solow, and is now using the name Harrison, and her name is Harrison Solow, so she is his wife, and I can, only imagine what she's going through right now. But anyway, he was very important to Star Trek, and will be greatly missed. I recommend people go check out his METV Legends interview to learn more about him. It's on YouTube. So there's that.
Well, my news is far less depressing. In fact,
Yay.
It's the opposite of depressing. It's really cool.
Good.
So apparently, I don't know, is this being run by NASA or I'm not sure. There's a scientific organization called METI, which
Yes.
is basically like the complement to SETI. Apparently, someone was sitting around and they realized, hey, what if someone else is doing exactly what we're doing and just listening for signals, and we're never gonna connect that way, So METI is short for messaging extraterrestrial intelligence, and Anson Mount has just joined the project.
Oh, fascinating.
It is. I have
Um,
no idea what he's doing. I doubt he's doing any of the science, although you never know. He could be a smart guy. I don't really know him that well.
I have an idea that he is on the board of directors. I don't know where I might get that idea.
Did you read the article that I'm
possibly
skimming?
Be.
Yeah, that's
No, because this is unscripted. We don't plan any of this. We always surprise each other with our Star Trek news articles. For those who don't know, SETI is SETI is short for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. METI, of course, is messaging extraterrestrial intelligence. But anybody who's a fan of Contact, like I am, knows what SETI is.
Or maybe you've played an old Civilization game.
That's true. There is that. So.
Or, you just happen to be a nerd like us and know what SETI is even out of context.
Right. Exactly.
Or not. I mean, you don't have to be a nerd.
You don't have to be. Yes, you do. Everybody should be a nerd.
Well,
nerds are awesome.
This is true. The geeks shall inherit the earth.
There you go. So there you go. Yet again, another merging of Star Trek and real science. That's pretty cool.
And I gotta say, I'm looking at this picture in the article of Anson Mount in his TOS Enterprise uniform, and dadgum if that's not a sharp-looking uniform.
That's a beautiful uniform. I love it.
I really impressed. They took the original series uniform and just gave it some pizzazz,
bumped it up a notch.
Yeah.
Well, it's the basic structure of the Discovery uniforms.
Yeah, you can see the little rings up there by the shoulder.
Rings on the shoulders and all that. Yep.
Yeah.
And the collar's the same. So that it echoes, right?
Yeah.
But then it's conceivable that it comes from the same, that maybe our TVs just didn't get a clear picture in 1960s.
Right,
that's what they really look like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
cool.
the next Star Trek upgrade, how they've right now they've just CGI'd all the ships and everything up.
Yeah.
Next they're gonna go in and put all the snazzy uniforms on.
They're gonna fix all the collars.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. There you go. That's great.
Except for Kirk.
Yeah. Except for
him, they're just gonna take the shirt off all the time.
Right. I actually found online there was a tally of the number of times Kirk's shirt was ripped or removed during the original series. Nice. I can't remember the number. I think it was 20 times or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
In 3 seasons, that's not bad.
That's getting up there. Yeah, it's pretty good. Okay, so last bit, and I don't know. I mean, this is not news exactly. This is more like a plug, but it's okay. Oh, yeah. It's my show. I can plug stuff.
It's my show, and I'll plug if I want to.
Plug if I want to. All right, anyway. So I have a friend called Neil Shirley, and he's a really cool guy and does a lot of cool stuff on Twitter and things, and just a really intelligent person because he's a Star Trek nerd. He also contributed to the book Spockology, which is out there on my website and on Amazon, whatever, if you're interested in it. Cool collection of writing on Spock and Leonard Nimoy. But Neil, also you can see Neil on one of the Spocktoberfest videos that's on the old YouTube channel. Just search Spocktoberfest on YouTube, you'll find it. He was one of our guests on there. But he has a newsletter, and I don't know how long he has had this, and I have not known about it. But it's a newsletter called Star Trekking, and basically it just brings to your inbox a little bouquet of Star Trek stuff from around the web. And there'll be some cool articles linked a lot of times, and then also just some cool memes and images and just really fun stuff that, cool artwork. And it's just, here's a Star Trek cake that somebody made that I had actually found on Twitter myself. And just that sort of stuff. And it's just really cool, little cool videos and things like that. It's a great little thing. I love it. It makes me happy when it arrives in my inbox. He says The ongoing thesis of this newsletter is that whether you're actively looking for it or not, Star Trek is everywhere. So there you go. That's what it is. Star Trek everywhere he finds it. And it's really cool. I highly recommend it, and there will be a link in the description. There you go.
Very cool.
Okay.
All right. So, Star Trek Discovery.
Star Trek Discovery? What's that? Oh boy. Star Trek Discovery, episode 6.
Yes, Scavengers.
Which, if you read anything I put out last week and it said last week was episode 6, that's just because sometimes I'm doing this stuff at 3 o'clock in the morning and and I don't know what episode we're on.
Nice.
Yeah, so episode 6, Scavengers. Yeah, thoughts, ideas, questions, comments, hints, allegations, and things left unsaid. From you, Tim. I'm talking to you.
Let's see. I liked it. I enjoyed it.
One of these days, I'll get a better response than that. I'm just hoping. Anyway, yeah, I thought it was a cool episode. I really enjoyed it. I think it introduces some interesting ethical conundrums, which we'll talk about throughout the episode. Actually, our theme comes from that.
All right, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way first, shall we?
Yeah.
Oh my.
That was a very bad elephant. I was like,
horrible.
not wanting. I didn't want to do it too loud because I thought it might Anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
So start that over because
Nope.
Let's get the elephant out of the room, Tim. What is it?
Oh goodness. So let's start with that. The kiss.
The kiss. Oh, the kiss.
In the turbo lift.
Do you know that until this moment I'd actually forgot about the kiss for a day or so?
Oh wow.
I actually wasn't thinking about it.
Well,
yeah.
My wife giggled incessantly. And I gotta agree with her. It was a little cheesy.
Cheesy?
Yeah.
You thought it was cheesy? What was cheesy about it? Because Linus interrupted and all that stuff is kind of
no. That was enjoyable. I like that because that was set up really well.
Yeah.
No, it just felt so over the top. You know.
Really?
Yeah, it was just the camera panning around and the little bit of fuzziness around the edges, and I feel like the music, and it was all just so cheesy.
Come on, man. We get so little romance in Star Trek. When we have it, let's have it. I mean, I enjoyed that.
I'm all for romance. I just think that scene was shot poorly.
I didn't think it was shot poorly. I thought it was beautiful. It was so beautiful. I mean, to me, kissing is often uncomfortable on screen for me. Just no matter who's kissing, it just looks weird.
Maybe you should stop kissing screens.
Maybe I should. Oh boy. But to me, I don't know. To me, it's hard for kissing to not look awkward on screen. For me, I don't know why. It's just always something that seems awkward to me. People's lips coming together is just strange. I mean, like I haven't done it a million times myself, but at the same time, I liked they had dramatic angles and they moved around and it was, let's take a beauty moment. Let's just enjoy. This is like, I don't know. I liked it. I liked it a lot. I was like, these people have been, will they or won't they? I mean, we haven't been there for it, but they've been will they or won't they for like a year. And now they're finally will-theying. And
I felt like cool. The moment was ruined by just the overselling of it.
I didn't think it was over anything. I thought it was sweet and romantic, and I like it.
It was cheesy. It totally killed the moment for me.
Okay. Linus didn't kill the moment for you, but the moment itself killed the moment for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all right. We've talked about that elephant.
That's all I have to say about the entire episode. The next 26 minutes are all yours.
Oh boy. When you say that, that's the time I won't have anything to say.
Yeah. Yep. That's
Well,
funny.
okay. So the other thing, go good, good.
No, no. I was just
Nope.
going to try and ask a leading question, but you
Oh,
sound
please
like you've
ask a
got
leading
something to say.
question. Oh no,
Nope. No.
I don't know what I was going to say. I
I forgot
literally
it
don't
already.
know. What were you going to ask?
No,
Say it.
so I was going to ask what you thought of the Orions.
The Orions?
Yeah, the Orion.
Oh, the Orion. Oh, he was like the other Orion. He's a green dude. I don't
Yeah,
know what to think of him.
I don't know either. Like I
Yes.
said, it wasn't a very good leading question.
No, it wasn't. That was actually pretty terrible.
Enjoy the next 25 minutes of silence.
No, I don't need to. Oh my goodness. That was great, Tim. It was beautiful. That's what I pay you for. Where do we go next? What do we do next? Oh,
Okay,
what do you
so
think?
since you don't know what to talk about, I just want to say
don't.
I
You're confusing
really liked the line. We were toying around the idea of making this our main topic, but ended up going with the one that you
Hmm.
hear in the title. But I really liked when Burnham kind of tells Giorgio that vulnerability is not a weakness.
Yeah.
That was really cool. And I liked Giorgio's reaction too. Where like for a second you almost think that she's about to accept that.
Mm-hmm.
And then she doesn't. She falls back on her Terran upbringing.
Well,
I
and
can't remember her line, but
yeah. Well, and that's the way her character. I think it was very, very believable.
mhm.
I think if her character had just kind of broken or melted right then, I would have been like, like I don't believe that, because she spent her lifetime
Mhm.
building
Yeah,
up this.
no, there's a lot of wall of shields to break
Mm,
down there.
hmm.
So yeah, I absolutely appreciate that she didn't, but
Yes.
I liked seeing that there was a little bit of a chink where she thought
Hmm.
about it for a second. Whereas like a
Yes.
season ago, she would have just rolled her eyes and moved on.
Yes.
But yeah, so there's some very slow, subtle development with her, and I like it.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me, and it goes back to, and maybe this is kind of a theme for the whole season. That our episode, it's okay to be not okay. That sense of not okayness, and coming to terms with it,
Mm-hmm.
and recognizing it and reconciling with it. And I think Giorgio is going to have the hardest time of that of anyone.
Sure.
And the fact that we see that much of a glimmer, from her, I think means that she's in a really, really bad space.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it says that Michael means so much to her, and the thought that she might lose Michael, has affected her a lot, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really interested to see where the character goes from here, and what exactly is going on with her. Did you get any
with
more?
those flashbacks.
Mm-hmm. It's more specific. She says something about her son. She has
Yeah.
blood on her hands. Or like, did
Uh-huh.
she kill her son? What's up?
Yeah. It's gonna be interesting.
Mm-hmm. And does this have something to do with David Cronenberg from the previous episode, her
Right.
interrogator? I don't know. I say David Cronenberg. I don't know if the character has a name, even in the script. I don't know that he has a name.
I wonder if we're gonna start calling them like you remember the show Heroes?
No, I didn't watch it.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a character in
Sorry.
there. We didn't know his name. He had horn-rimmed glasses,
Oh, right.
and so, or like from X-Files, the cigarette smoking man,
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, Cancer Man.
Cancer Man.
From
Yeah.
X Files. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Even though I didn't really watch X Files, but yeah. So that's going to be interesting. I'm curious about that. But I agree with you too. That idea of that fear of vulnerability, and that Michael dials in on that. And I think that's so important. And I have spoken to people multiple times who, let's say, will avoid crying
Mm-hmm.
or feel bad for crying because they say, oh, that's a sign of weakness, or something like that, or we'll just outright say that they don't have emotions or they can't express emotions or whatever. I've spoken with multiple people who will not, who actually actively criticize themselves for having emotional vulnerability. And
Mm-hmm.
that is, I think a lot of people have that. I think it's great that we have female characters dealing with that in this series. When Kayla was talking to Hugh, about pilots being macho.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I love that they use the word macho to refer to a woman. To say that yes, that is a thing that women do too. It's not just a man thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that interesting, and I think it's important that that vulnerability be something that we're not afraid of, because we need it.
We need to sit everybody down in front of some Brené Brown.
I don't know Brené Brown.
You don't know Brené Brown? You should go look up
Mm-mm.
some of her stuff.
Okay.
She does a lot of work on vulnerability. She's got
Okay.
pretty famous TED Talk, I think, and some good
Okay.
books.
I feel like I've heard the name, but I just don't know this person. But that's okay. Cool. All right. Yeah, and or Fred Rogers,
Right.
Yeah. So, but that is important, and it's not a, and even at that, even things that you can call weak, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's weak in some way, and weakness is not a bad thing either.
Right.
Right? It's just a part of being human. And I think, especially from a Christian perspective, we follow someone, we follow a Messiah, we follow a Savior whose salvific work is through defeat, whose posture is humility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And who proves his divinity through brokenness. We should never be afraid of weakness. I think weakness or vulnerability, however you want to call it, whatever you think of it, I think it's a sacred thing. I think it's a beautiful thing. It's just human, and we shouldn't fear it. Yeah.
Agreed.
What else is in this episode?
I loved the tech upgrades.
Gosh, yes.
Oh my god, my favorite part of the tech upgrade stuff is when Detmer is looking at all these upgrades and she's like, "Do we really need all this?" And the other guy, I don't know his name yet, but the other guy was like, "Hell yeah, we do."
Well, I think that was that Bryce, the guy with the
Maybe,
beard.
like I said, I don't know their names.
Anyway,
but
but yeah, like yes, we do. We absolutely need this.
that was
And Tilly,
pretty sweet.
Tilly was nerding so much. She's just like, "Oh my god, this is the coolest thing ever." Yeah, it was great, and I love seeing people do that. I love seeing people nerding over technology.
Uh-huh.
I kind of think of Jadzia in the DS9 episode Trials and Tribulations, when she gets to, she's like
Yes.
swooning over the original series tricorder, like,
Uh-huh.
oh, it's so sleek, look at the design, just like nostalgia and all that.
Right.
I love seeing people nerding over technology, and
Speaking
yeah.
of nerding over technology, I saw someone pointed out. So, and I don't know if this was just an oversight or if maybe this is a really good catch, but at one point when the Orion salvage guy shows Giorgio a phaser,
mm-hmm.
it's like a TNG era phaser, and she
Yes.
knows what it is, and she knows that it's broken down, and now maybe she's just bluffing because that's what she's doing this whole time, but maybe she knows more about something than we think she knows.
I think Giorgio's knowledge is extensive. I think she's a genius, because in the previous episode, she knew how to disable the holograms. Now, in all honesty, I think blinking at the holograms is kind of dumb.
Yeah, that was a little.
That was like this tiny version of the old original series, confuse the computer and it explodes. Kind of thing,
Yeah.
So I didn't like that as much, but of course Michelle Yeoh can play anything and make you believe it. So it worked great in the scene. The rhythm was there. The character was there. From a writing standpoint, I didn't love it, but But you see that she has very intimate knowledge of a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she has cultivated that on purpose. It's interesting that she has that knowledge in our universe,
Right.
But maybe
Because holograms, we didn't have holograms in, like, I mean, obviously you're talking about our universe as opposed to the Terran universe, but
Right.
also the timeline. Because I don't believe they had holograms in their original timeline, did they?
Yeah,
I mean, they've got the image that you can project, but
yeah,
no, like the Doctor, no holograms with.
nothing like that. No, and I was a little confused as to how she could know that stuff
Yeah.
in that episode too. So there again, I'm really not sure what's going on with Georgiou and how she knows the things she knows. But that could be a Section 31 thing. She was in Section 31 for a while, and
I think the speculation with the phaser, at least, was that there's some time travel shenanigans going on with her.
maybe so.
I wonder if maybe there was just some information that she got from maybe, the Defiant that they had in the original Terran universe.
Mm-hmm.
That was TOS, right?
Right. Yeah.
So even then, that phaser would still be anachronistic.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so, but so with the holograms, like you're saying, so
Yeah.
that's advanced knowledge, and I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where she gets it. I honestly don't.
So, well, that's two consistent examples of that now. Yeah. So either the writers are just being awful at letting stuff slip through, which I doubt, or they're subtle little hints at something deeper that she knows.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I'm going to go with that.
I agree with you. I think you're bang on. So fascinating. So into the crux of the episode.
Sure.
Well, but we do need to talk about Stamets and Adira, though.
Oh yeah.
Is that a beautiful relationship, or is that a beautiful relationship that's budding right there?
I'm still not 100% sold on it yet. It
really?
Feels like such, like, I get the motivation behind it for Stamets,
Mm-hmm.
but it feels like such a departure for him to just suddenly be this warm and nurturing mentor type person.
Well, to a degree, perhaps, but especially you look at the way he responded to Adira at the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Like, get this child off off my equipment and all that. But as he learns more about Adira, I think he's really, and like he was telling Hugh, there's so much that he identifies with in Adira's story, in Adira's narrative, right?
Yeah, no, like I said, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels like a departure personality wise from him. Like I can get that he wants to do this.
Yeah.
Just the way he's going about it feels off.
I just think it's growth. Honestly. That's how I see it. I just see it as growth. I just see it as he through his relationship with Tilly, through everything he's gone through with Hugh, I think he's growing as a person. Especially with his journey through the mycelial network, I think that softened him in a lot of ways. Of course, when things were not, going so well. I mean, he was very bristly with Tilly,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. I think he. I don't know. I just think he's growing. I think he's opening up as a person. Because it seems
That's
on
fair.
track. It seems on track with who he is around you, for sure.
Yeah, and as we're talking about this, I was just thinking, the first season he's under the command of what turns out to be a Terran captain who's probably
Right.
putting him in extremely stressful situations. The second
Yes.
season he's trying to cope with being the navigator for this network thing. So I can see where the stress of the first two seasons would not have allowed this part of his personality to show all that much.
Right. And I think also when he figured out because in that first episode with Adira, and he figured out what the right tack was, what the right approach was. I think that revelation also, he was like, oh, like solving a problem. He just goes, oh, that's the direction I need to go. And once he goes that direction, then that causes him to soften toward Adira, and that changes things for him as well. So, and that self-identification too. That's a big thing. Seeing yourself in somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So, So I get it. Yeah, it's different from how he's behaved. But I really appreciate that conversation between them, where he says, where he's learning about Gray, and Adira's telling him about Gray, and his reaction is perfect, because I get it. I love somebody who died but who wasn't gone. So if you tell me that your person has died but is not gone, I believe you. And I thought it was really interesting, too, that Adira said, well, yeah, the symbiont's supposed to contain their memories, but I don't, but this one seems to contain his soul,
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting. I do a whole thing on the soul in Star Trek, where it shows up and where we talk about it. And that's fascinating to me as well, that Adira can't find a better word than soul for what she's interacting with. So, yeah. But again, it's just one of those moments. It's kind of like I was alluding to last episode with the interrogation scene. People are telling these stories that sound crazy when you say it like that, but that's what it's like. I think sometimes to be a person of faith, to be a person who has faith, to be a person who maybe has had some experiences that are outside what other people have experienced, and I think Stamets' experience, softens him to that.
I mean, it is, as you point out, this subject of loving someone who's died but is still there. I mean, I guess that's kind of the story of every Christian, right?
In that a person who has died, is still alive eternally somewhere. Their soul is still alive.
I mean, I was talking about Jesus, but
Oh. Well, there's that too. You mean the big one, right?
Yeah, the Sunday school answer.
Yeah,
there.
the Sunday school answer is Jesus. Yeah. That's true. I mean, I that's a good perspective. That's a good way to look at it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I worry about that. I have concern about that, about how people interact with Christ as a present reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how often we name things as Jesus or as God's Spirit or whatever that may not be. I'm personally very hesitant to say, I felt the Spirit of God here or there, or I believe Jesus is saying this, or God is telling me that. I'm very, very hesitant to use that language, because I think it's really easy as a Christian to lean on that and to assume that. If you get some idea in your head that feels like it didn't quite come from you or whatever, or you get some idea in your head particularly that is self-affirming, right? You just want to grab onto that. And I think we have to be really careful. I think we have to be really careful that, and that's another thing that people can abuse too, because they can preach something, they can say something that, they say Jesus appeared to them and told them this or that or the other thing. But, is that thing that they heard, does that line up with everything else you know about Jesus? Does that line up with everything you know about Scripture? Does that line up with how you see God tending to work in the world, and test the spirits and all that? Don't just assume something and follow somebody. So, but agreed, that the idea that you love someone who has died but is still there, that is the Christian experience. That is very true. So what about the main idea here that we've zeroed in on, the unsanctioned mission?
Yeah, just the whole idea of um, Burnham feeling like going after Book was more important than her ideal of staying of obeying Saru
Mm-hmm.
and not putting anyone else.
And harm.
Because Saru did have a very good point that they're still very new here, and that
Mm-hmm.
anything she does like this is going to reflect upon the entire ship.
Right. Exactly. I mean, yes, he's absolutely right about that. Um, at the same time, and I think Michael was wrong to do what she did, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think she was following her heart, as it were, and our hearts have to be appropriately oriented before we can follow them and trust
Yeah.
them in that regard, which is a spiritual discipline. But also, I think Saru didn't handle that correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I th-
I liked that what the admiral pointed out to him when they were having the discussion there. If you had
mhm.
brought this to me at the beginning, I might have decided the risk was or the intel was worth the risk.
Yeah, that's the thing, and that's where Saru has got to learn. And this is kind of a what I'm seeing here is that Michael has some tendencies, some rather dominant tendencies, right?
Mm-hmm.
From that exist in someone who's kind of used to being in charge. And then Saru has some more submissive tendencies that exist in someone who's used to having no power.
Mm-hmm.
And that headstrong nature that's in Michael that like is used to setting the tone and setting the pace and you know and deciding where we're going to go.
Mm-hmm. And she's just spent the past year living on her own
Right.
wits.
Letting that grow within herself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then Saru though has been put into a servile place his entire life. His whole race has.
Mm-hmm.
And he's learning and he has learned over time to be more in charge, but that sensibility that says, oh, the big person in charge wouldn't want to hear about this little thing, right? I don't want to make any waves. I don't want to risk being told no. I want to show deference. I want to show respect. All that.
Mm-hmm.
That is a tendency of someone who has been uh, put in a position to who has been under poor leadership or poor dominance, who has been under someone who has used their authority in a way that makes them feel like they can't voice their opinion or bring anything up. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like his intentions are good there, but he's overcautious.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he did spend that time under Lorca,
Right?
that I'm sure has contributed to that.
Right.
And he's seen what happened when Michael disobeyed Giorgio, which is what really kind of was in the back of my head the whole time. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
the last time you betrayed your captain, you remember the whole Klingon war thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
So his experience has definitely been one of there's a rigid hierarchy
Mm-hmm.
and stay within your place.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's not. I mean, there's something to be said for that on a certain level. It's like he has too much of what Michael needs, and Michael has too much of what he needs.
Right.
And in that regard, they kind of balance each other, which is why
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of sad to see that relationship break apart at
Yeah,
the end of the episode.
there definitely needed to be some repercussions for that, but I was very sad to see her get demoted out of the first officer spot.
At the same time, though, I don't know what else Saru could have done.
Yeah.
In all honesty, it's like you're the first officer. Like
Mm-hmm.
you are held to it. You have to be held to a particularly high standard.
Right.
Um,
Like even Kirk got busted down from admiral to captain.
that's right. Even though he saved the Earth,
Right.
or his crew saved the Earth. Um, But of course, in that case, and I write about this in the book too. I mean, that was also kind of a reward. I mean,
Yeah.
technically, it was a punishment, but really, it was giving Kirk what he needs and what he wants. His first best destiny. It was restoring him.
And I think this is, it may not be like Michael's ultimate destiny. It may not be what she wants, but I think it is the best thing for her because it'll give her a chance to grow back into that first officer position. Like I think she'll be back there by the end of the season, but I think she needs to grow into it first.
I think you're right, and I've been in situations like this before too, where you start working with somebody or you start a particular relationship with somebody, either a friendship or a working relationship or whatever, right? And you think you know what your roles are going to be. You think you know how you're going to settle in, and you just kind of dive in, and you dive in without really investing everything you need to get to the point that you start at, you know?
Right.
And you have to scale it back and then come back in, you know, a step at a time. Kind of like getting into a cold pool. You know, you gotta step back out and then step back in and step back out and step back in. So that may be what's going on. That may be what happens here with Michael. So the other situation in that scene between the three of them, though, is I feel like the thing we're all talking around but not doing, and it's because the situation with Michael is so distracting, is that, you know, Admiral Vance is saying, okay, I can't search for the cause of the burn because I have too many other things to deal with. And Michael's saying, yeah, but I've spent the whole last year looking for the cause of the burn. I think it's absolutely essential for the survival of the Federation. It's like the obvious solution is to just commission Michael to find out what the cause of the burn is.
Yeah.
Why does nobody land on that in the scene? To me, that's just like the obvious. And maybe it's because Vance... maybe nobody's connected those dots. Maybe it's because Vance knows that Saru needs to discipline Michael before we move forward. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. It's really hard to say.
It is. And I again, it's one of those things where I feel like, is this just writers stretching it out?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because it kind of feels like it a little bit.
It feels like a little bit. And maybe that's just the obvious solution. And now Saru is first officerless.
Yeah. Yeah. So who's going to be his first officer now?
I don't know. I have been puzzling over this for days.
Oh, gosh. What's her name? The Spore Drive Ops. The one who took over for Arium. I can't think of her name.
Nielsen.
She was the one that got handed the bridge when
Arium died.
No. She.
When
this episode.
Yes. She got the con. Yeah, she's one of two characters who have been given the con. It was her and the Asian dude whose name I can't remember.
Yes.
But they're the two people who have been given the con when everybody else is out of the room. So there's possibility. So I kind of did some research and looked up, and Nielsen is actually the one who has rank. She's actually the only person right now who has the rank to be immediately bumped up to first officer. She's kind of next in line as far as I can tell. In terms of the hierarchy. Now, that's obviously circumventing Stamets, and Culber and other people who have rank but have other jobs.
Who aren't exactly in the command track.
Right. And
on the bridge.
Right. They're not in the right department. They have jobs to do. And that's the other thing. Go ahead.
Maybe Vance will give them someone. They're going to need someone who knows this time period.
Oh, that's possible. I had thought about the
security
Vance.
chief?
Yeah.
No, she's way too important.
What is her name? Willa? I think her last name is Willa. Anyway, yeah, exactly. But she's too important. But the thing I was thinking about from a writing standpoint is just who is enough of a character to put in that role, right? And you just don't have anybody.
You know who would have been great? Non.
Oh man. Yeah, that's a definite possibility. Shoot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wrote her out just a season too, or an episode too soon.
Too soon. Boy, that's the truth, man. But I think it's going to be Nilsson. I really do. But, like in TNG, like you look at Best of Both Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And when Riker needs a first officer, obviously Data's the first choice.
Right.
Data's next in line, right? If I keep wanting to say Stamets and Saru. If Shelby hadn't been there, right, and hadn't had the specific expertise we need right now to save the captain, we would not, or not save the captain, go on and fight the Borg, whichever we're going to do.
Right.
We would not have had Shelby in that role. We would have had Data, and that's who it would be. If Jean-Luc was still captain and we lost Will for some reason, Data would be first officer. I mean, we just know that. In Discovery, it's not that clear. And it's not even that clear looking at everybody's ranks. See, the person relationally, like the way the characters are written, relationally, the person who Saru should pick is Tilly.
Right.
But Tilly, for some unknown reason, is still an ensign. Are they going to Harry Kim her? Because
oh my goodness.
I cannot stand Tilly being an ensign. I'm like, she needs to at least be lieutenant on the basis of her knowledge and her skills. From my
Lieutenant
perspective.
JG, sure.
JG, yes, exactly, yes. I think that's what she functions like, is a Lieutenant JG. I don't think she functions like an ensign, especially since she's kind of part of the engineering triumvirate that we have now. So I would have picked Tilly just from a writing standpoint, but in terms of rank, it just doesn't work. So I think it's going to be Nilsson.
Okay.
The thing for me, or a big moment for me, it's the small moments are always big, especially in Discovery, right?
Right.
Is when Michael pulls off the Tricom badge after she's been demoted.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that. Oh, which, by the way, it can look like she's no longer in Starfleet, right?
Yeah, that was my initial, is she leaving Starfleet?
Here is the thing. The design on these Tricom badges has carried over a thing from the design on the original Discovery badges, which I don't like, which is that rank insignia are on the badge. So, in TNG, we have 1 pip, 2 pips.
That.
Yeah, we have 1 pip, 2 pips, 3 pips, 4 pips, right? And we have the black pips and the gold pips. On Discovery badges, they have pips, but the pips are on the badge. In the Tricom badges, they're notches. So that 4 notches is captain, 3 notches is commander, right? I don't know what they do for JG. But so when she is going to change rank, she's going to get a new Tricom badge. So that's why she pulls the badge off.
I mean, surely it's programmable matter that they would just, say, hey, fill in that.
Well, that's
that
true.
extra notch.
That's true. But as far as I can tell,
she's not going down in rank. She hasn't been demoted. She's just been removed from the first officer position, right?
That's true. Okay, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well,
Fine, undermine.
I'm just saying it was really weird. And now I've seen where comm badges have the department insignia on it. So maybe she was pulling off the command insignia because she was going to have to put a science insignia back on.
Maybe so, but I haven't seen that insignia system on the Tricom badges. I'm not sure. There's one thing I dislike. We were talking about the Discovery uniforms earlier. One thing I really dislike about the Discovery uniforms is it's difficult to tell rank by looking at a person.
Yeah,
which is
really
why we have the whole conversation about who becomes first officer, because we can't tell that Nilsson is the one who has rank because it's not clear. So that is a problem for me. But moving on. But when she takes that comm badge off, there is the Tricom badge off. There is that sigh of relief that's kind of bound up also with, I think, her grief at the breaking of relationship with Saru.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, why she then addresses him as Saru instead of Sir, and says, "You're doing the right thing," as a relationship thing, as a friend, talking to him as a friend, saying, "Hey, I'm not going to hold this against you," as a friend, which I think is kind of cool. But she had to know. On some level, she had to know that she could lose her position over this. Mm-hmm. And I've wondered if this wasn't a Mariner moment for her, where consciously or unconsciously, she's bucking for a demotion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it goes back to, like I was saying in the first or second episode. I guess it would be the third episode, where it didn't seem like she really wanted to be up in the chain of command.
Yeah, and then she kind of gets into it, and it's like she's trying to reconcile two halves of herself, two parts of herself, and I think we find that in our lives a lot, and particularly I think we find that as Christians too, where it's like, okay, Christian world tells me to be like this, my talents and interests tell me to do this, or the world around me tells me to do this. Is the world around me voice always bad just because it's the world around me that doesn't come directly from my church? And
Right.
and because I see so many people who are led into oppression that way.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it works one way, sometimes it works the other way, right? In
Sure.
terms of
Right.
what voices we listen to. But we have to find, I think the voice of God is ultimately our authority. We have to listen to what the Spirit may be saying to us.
And I also want to point out, or make relevant to your thought process. Earlier, we've referred to the Federation as the church and the people being the church. And so I don't know if that can factor into your conversation or your thought
Well,
process. But
that's true too, and so there's a sense of a church that's larger than the church organization, or the church institution, just like there's a sense of justice that's larger than the law,
right.
and so I think that's something that's at play with Michael in this episode, because I mean what she does is good work. It's Federation work. It's Starfleet work.
Right.
She's freeing slaves, for goodness sakes. She's saving lives, and that's what Vance says. Like, if the reason you're not in the brig is that you saved lives. So there's merit to what she did.
And it strikes me at one point in one of the more recent episodes, Saru says, like, the ideals of this Federation have saved my life more than once.
Right. And Michael says it's the people who saved me, and I can't separate the people from the organization. I don't know where that line is. It's all the same for me. The people and the ideals. That was last episode.
Okay.
That they said that, and that's, again, it's like the people, right? Well, Book is one of her people. And she doesn't make that separation. She's like, I've got to go where I've got to go and save who I've got to save. There are lots of ways this could have been handled differently. But ultimately, I think the theme that we're going for here, and the thing that we're ultimately talking about, is less about authority and service to authority, right, or obedience to authority, but we're talking about sacrifice, because she's pulling that badge off. She's sacrificing something to do what she thinks is right.
And it's not just the badge that she's willing to sacrifice too. It's like she has to understand that her relationship with Saru and Tilly and a lot of her shipmates are probably going to suffer.
Right. And that tells you how important Book is to her. So then that leads us, doesn't it, into our larger topic, or into the rest of the topic, into carrying this into the rest of Star Trek. You and I had talked over the weekend about Search for Spock, and how it relates to this episode, and how Kirk relates to this episode, in his willingness to sacrifice his commission, sacrifice his life, really, if he needs to save Spock, because Spock sacrificed his life for Kirk and for everybody else on the ship. So that was an interesting thing in our conversation that shifted from that authority conversation to that sacrifice conversation. So tell me a little bit of your thinking on that subject.
Well, I guess my thinking kind of is looking more at the angle of anytime you're trying to, not resist is not the right word, but whenever you're going against this authority figure, it's more about what sacrifice is demanded, because you can't disobey authority without the expectation of consequence, right? You have to be accountable for your actions. So there's this attitude sometimes that if what I'm doing is right, I shouldn't suffer any consequence.
Right.
And I think what Kirk especially shows us is that there has to be an expectation for it to truly be a sacrifice, for it to truly be meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
You have to accept the consequences.
Yeah.
And you have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be willing to put that on the line. And Kirk, absolutely. I've forgotten the guy's name, but the captain of the Excelsior. When Kirk and company are stealing the Enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
the captain of the Excelsior says to him, "Kirk, if you do this, you'll never sit in the captain's chair again." Which is interesting because Kirk at that moment is an admiral.
Right.
Okay, so like even though like we talk about at the end of Star Trek 4, he has the consequence of being demoted, but that even in itself is almost a reward because it's restoring to him to what Spock calls his first best destiny.
Right. But he had no way of knowing that that's what was going to be the outcome. It was going to be the consequence.
Exactly. But that
to him, to his knowledge, the consequence was losing his commission, losing the Enterprise, losing his crew.
Yes.
Just like, I mean, we were talking, I don't know how quickly you want to jump from topic to topic here.
Yeah.
But like we were also talking about with Data and the exocomps.
Right. We'll get to that in a sec.
Okay.
Because you're right and you're bang on. And but the captain there, Styles is his name. Captain Styles says to Kirk, "You do this, you'll never sit in the captain's chair again." He goes to what Kirk really loves. Mm-hmm. And what Kirk is really sacrificing, because if he's bumped down, if he's no longer an admiral, if he's out of Starfleet, I mean, he could get kicked out of Starfleet for this easily. Right. Getting bumped down to captain is yes, a reward in his context, but it's also a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
So he could easily get kicked out of Starfleet, and I think that's probably. I mean, there's no way Styles could know this necessarily unless he just knows something about Kirk, but it's just instinctive that like that's why he's even still in Starfleet, is kind of to orbit. I mean, it's just like in the motion picture, where he takes command of the Enterprise away from Decker because that's where his heart really is. That's what he really wants. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of a jerk move what he does, right? In that one of many that Kirk commits, but he that's what he really wants, and that's kind of why he hangs on to the Admiralty, because at some point he can be back in command again, So, but yes, it's also Data in the exocomps in the quality of life. I mean, Data. That's just Data, totally insubordinating, because there's a value there. It's the value of the life of the exocomps that nobody else sees. Everybody else sees the exocomps as machines. Data sees them as living beings. And he's the only one who sees that, and he knows that, and he knows that these are the only ones. And if they are forced to sacrifice themselves in this moment, then to save Jean-Luc and Geordi, then they will have been murdered essentially. Mm-hmm. And he is adamant, and Riker comes in and just storms in, with his very directive approach, right? And is like, "Mr. Data, you release those transporter lockouts now. I'm your commanding officer. You do what I say." And Data's like, "I'm not going to do it. There's no way. I locked out the transporter. Nobody can access it because I'm awesome and I can do that because I'm an android." Yeah. and there's no way. Sorry, that's the gambit that I have, and I'm going to keep playing it. And he's like, I don't remember if he threatens to demote him or put him in the brig or whatever. He's like, "I'll resign my commission. I will quit Starfleet. That's fine. Whatever. I will resign my commission, so you can't do anything to me. And I still won't release the transporter lockouts. And you will have gained nothing. So there." And it's because he's so committed to making sure that the exocomps are preserved, their lives are preserved, and that's where Will changes his approach and says, "Well, what if we ask the exocomps if they're willing?" And he says, "Okay, if they're willing, then I will release the transporter lockouts." That makes it their decision. That recognizes their sentience, right?
Right. But the sacrifice that Data is willing to make here, he's prepared to make, is everything, and not just his friends' lives. Even if somehow they make it out alive, he has to know that he's sacrificing their relationship with them at the very least.
Right, and that's the thing that he talks to Jean-Luc about at the end of the episode. He's like, you might be wondering why I was willing to sacrifice sacrifice your life for the sake of several small machines. And he said, when my status as a living being was under question, you advocated for me, and the exocomps had no such advocate, and I could not allow them to be destroyed. And Jean-Luc says to him, "It's the most human thing you've ever done." And I think that is the highest praise you can give someone in Starfleet. Of all the souls, right? His was the most human. Yeah. Getting back to Kirk. It's the highest praise you can give somebody in Star Trek. And I will also say that since in Roddenberry's worldview, the divine is embodied and reflected in humanity, that humanity is divine, humanity is God. In our view, we would say that humanity is made in the image of God. That there is a sense in which in Star Trek, when you say something's human, it's tantamount to saying it's divine. But moving on, that there is that moment where you have to count the cost,
right?
And you have to decide what the most important thing truly is to you. Years ago when I was talking with my mentor about working various jobs and trying to find a career, trying to find my place, teaching and all those sorts of things. I was a professor for a little while, and he was talking about some things that maybe were ways that I didn't fit into the institution's culture. They're looking for a guy who's like this, they're looking for a guy who's like that, and you're not that guy. And he's like, you can kind of, and if you want to, you can essentially, I'm paraphrasing to no end, but you can essentially fake it and be that guy, and you can have a job because you have the skills. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not willing to fake it. I'm like, I either they want me or they don't want me. And if they don't want me, I don't want to work for them. At a certain point, I'm going to have to, you make compromises no matter what you do. The question is, what are you willing to give up? What are you willing to compromise? What are you not willing to compromise about who you are? And that's a decision we have to make in all kinds of areas of life. But in these situations where we're talking about that willingness to sacrifice, Spock sacrificing his life, right? That's Christ sacrificing his life, For what are we willing to sacrifice ourselves? For what are we willing to sacrifice the things that are dear to us? That's an important conversation to have. That's an important consideration to have. Self-sacrifice particularly, I think, is a deeply Christian value. And is deeply important to being a Christian, is a sense of self-sacrifice. And sometimes that self-sacrifice, we talked about earlier about vulnerability in this episode. Sometimes that self-sacrifice is sacrificing your own ego, sacrificing what you're clinging to that makes you feel better than the people around you.
Yep. Sometimes it's sacrificing it's just as simple as sacrificing the comfort of thinking that you're right.
Yes. Or feeling that you're right.
Right.
There are situations in life where it's not about who's right, where it's okay to let somebody else think they're right, even if you think they're wrong, because there's something larger at stake, because there's a relationship at stake, because there's emotional well-being at stake, because there's justice at stake, because there's any number of things at stake. And it's really important to not just think about what you're willing to sacrifice, but what you're not willing to sacrifice. How long is that list of things that you're not willing to sacrifice, and why is it that long, and should it be? I think humility, cultivating humility, is part of that process, is allowing ourselves to sacrifice more than maybe we would otherwise if we were holding on too tight to our own ego and not wanting it to get bruised. That's important because the scriptures say of Jesus, a bruised reed he will not break. And many of us, as we come to God in whatever way we do, however messy or weird it may be, we are often bruised reeds, and it's good to know that those are hands we can trust to not break us. I don't know if that relates exactly, but that does relate to the vulnerability thing. But anyway.
Yeah. So our question this episode comes from some feedback we got on last week's episode. This listener is wanting to know, do you think Nog should have gotten his own spin-off show? And if so, what should it have been about? Because, there was some talk for a while there about a Captain Nog show.
Was there? When? When did this happen?
I gotta say, there was, maybe it's just like internet people demanding it, sort of a thing.
I mean, there was a legitimate push for Captain Worf.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking
Dorn
of.
was talking about it even, and I was excited about that. I would watch a Captain Worf show in a second. I would watch anything with Worf. Worf is just one of my all-time favorite Star Trek characters. That's one of those characters who, like, yes, I could follow him as a captain. Who's not a captain, but like I could follow him as a captain.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
See, I'm not sure that I see Nog as someone who would make captain.
Really?
Of course, we're not necessarily talking about Captain Nog, are we? We're talking about a Nog spinoff. That doesn't necessarily mean a Captain Nog show.
True. In the context of when it would have aired, though, probably would have been
he would have been older.
Yeah,
like
and would have been a captain.
Yeah.
I mean, just in the sense of the show, the show premise at the time.
Yeah.
It was the captain was the lead. So if it was going to be a Nog show, he'd be a captain.
Well, I would think we could upend that expectation. I don't see Nog as a captain. Much as I love him, much as I admire him, I just don't see him as a captain. I can't tell you what ineffable quality he doesn't have, but I don't know. He doesn't read as a captain to me. I don't know. Do you think it's? I don't know.
But he was actually. So I'm consulting my alpha memory.
Oh yeah.
And apparently, in an alternate timeline, in 2389, he was a commander.
That's
Commander
right.
Nog visits his friend Jake in New Orleans on Earth.
Yes.
And then later in 2422, Nog by then promoted to captain.
That's right.
Headed the mission.
The Visitor.
Which ended in
I
failure.
think that's the Visitor.
Yes. The
Yeah.
Visitor.
Yeah. Oh, Tony Todd, by the way, amazing. Playing
yeah.
Jake, who also played Kern,
Kern.
Worf's brother. But yeah. So yeah, you're right. He did make captain. I mean, it would be fascinating. Anything with more Nog, any one character you would want to focus more time or attention on, especially from Deep Space Nine, I'm all for it. That would be fantastic. I don't. What would it be?
I would have liked to have seen, like, in a Nog show, whether or not he's captain.
Yeah.
I would have wanted to go more into the cultural shift. Like, what does his presence in the Federation do for the Ferengi the way Worf's presence has done for the Klingons,
Right.
And is it like the Klingons were talking about in Undiscovered Country? Are they just humanizing the Ferengi? Are they losing what makes them Ferengi? Are they becoming what we see as better?
Right.
Just because he's accepting our ideals? I would have liked to have seen some exploration there about what that meant for the Ferengi as a culture.
Well, of course, that lays over into the question of Rom. Spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen the end of the series. Close your ears. Close your big Ferengi ears. Rom as Nagus.
Oh, yeah.
Because Rom is the Grand Nagus, but, like, Are Rom's values Ferengi values? I mean, the Nagus himself, Zek, started shifting right toward the end of his reign.
Right.
Does that mean it's time for a new day in Ferengi society? Is it the culture being influenced by humans, and is that a bad thing? You know, I feel like this sort of knee-jerk reaction that a culture doesn't need to be shifted by an outside culture is kind of not how culture works.
Right.
You know, cultures always borrow from each other, cultures always learn from each other, and cultures always change because of each other. And when we don't want a culture to change, when we just want to preserve it, I feel like sometimes that can lead into things like nationalism and isolationism that are harmful, like to the global community, and then also harmful to ourselves.
It's also a certain amount of arrogance, like that. Like we feel in our state, we have the capacity and the intelligence to make the decision that your culture needs to stay the way it is. And that's denying them the right to say, hey, you know, we like this element from that culture and we like this element from that culture. We're going to run with it.
Right. So it's always an interesting conversation, because there is always something too that, you know, there's always a loss when you move forward and you change in a culture, in a society. And there is value in hanging on to and preserving old traditions or old ways of life. And you know, it's a back and forth. There are two sides to it. It can go in positive ways and it can go in negative ways. Sometimes cultures die because they don't change. Sometimes if you change, then you can preserve the past to learn from it and to keep what's good or what endures, right? But change as needed so that your culture, your people can survive in a distinctive way.
I think there's too much glorifying of the past in the good old days sort of sense.
Often happens.
Kind of, you know, culture was better then.
Right. But at the same time, it's also wrong to sort of move on from that in such a way that ignores it. We're going right to the heart of TNG's Relics, which really talks about which is biblical ideas. Let no one look down on you because of your age, or because of your youth, right? But then also don't disrespect people because they're older. In fact, value them because they're older. Relics is a great conversation about that. This has nothing to do with Nog in a certain sense. We've gone so far afield of the question.
Yes.
But it's a great question. And I think these kinds of things would be great for that series to explore. So maybe there's your answer.
Yeah. And now I'm envisioning, obviously it's not going to happen, but it would have been great to have a Captain Worf with Commander Nog as his first officer. Oh my gosh. That would have just been, you know.
Would those two even get along? I don't know. That would be weird. Would it be cool?
It would be.
Yeah.
But it's an odd couple sort of scenario, but it's one where you can definitely see them coming to respect each other.
Or it may be like last week with your whole Nog Saru thing. You just like putting Nog with tall, imposing guys.
Maybe.
Maybe so. I don't know. Well, anyway, thanks for the question. I hope that answers it to some rambling degree, and we appreciate you interacting with the show. Thank you very much. So, awesome. So, Tim, what do we have coming up next week? As though I need to ask.
Next week, we are going to be covering the next episode of The Mandalorian. I kid. We'll be covering the 7th episode of Discovery, which, I don't know, can I say the title?
Say the title.
Say the title? Okay, good. Unification 3.
I mean, I am beside myself to know that title. I usually don't know them in advance, but Unification 3. Ooh. I smell a TNG conversation in our future.
Oh yes. So, and the question about like this just made me think of, are we going to see Romulans? And that just reminded me that earlier when we were talking about Nog, are we going to see Ferengi in Discovery now?
Are
they floating around out there somewhere?
Anything in Discovery now. So
Yeah.
we'll find out.
So
I'm so excited.
I'm so glad they did that. Yeah.
So I'm so excited about next week. This is so cool. I hope that everybody at home will join us because it's going to be a great time. In the meantime, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And also be sure to send us your questions. Gospel According to Star Trek on Twitter or Facebook, or gospeltrekpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to discuss your question on the show. Tim, do you have anything else to say to the folks at home?
Marbles.
Oh, and that's going to make me lose mine because there's a whole segment of the show that nobody heard. That's a reference
Subscribe to the Patreon, folks, and you can get our outtakes.
I don't think the Patreon people are even going to get that. We don't even have a Patreon yet. Stop plugging it.
Oh.
We'll get there.
Whoops.
We'll get there. Oh, boy. But that's going to wrap it up. I mean, mercifully, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. For this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time.
I'm Tim Van Orden.
And I'm Kevin C. Neese. And as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper.
See you next time.